Have you ever wondered that just a fleeting contemptuous glance is enough to plant the seeds for a rage that lasts for years? In Fairview City, two sudden departures have been linked by wounds that cannot be coincidental. But that person is still waiting for the next victim. Do you dare to know the truth? At 11:47 p.m., Maple Street Alley still carried the damp metallic smell clinging to the air when the motionless body was discovered lying between two old brick walls. The yellowish streetlights slanted down onto the motionless victim, reflecting off the darkened wet traces. There were no screams, no cries for help, only the thick silence of a neighborhood that had fallen into forgotten sleep. That man had fallen without leaving any sign for the outside world, and Fairview City began a long night without answers. The victim was quickly identified as Mr. Arthur Blackwood, a wealthy businessman whose name was familiar in the city's business circles. Now curled up on the cold concrete like a discarded object, the metallic smell mingling with the damp rot of garbage, his final breath long dissolved into the darkness. Commander David Miller arrived at the scene with Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell. Their shoes crunched softly on shattered glass, a sound so faint it barely existed. Yet in that quiet space, it rang like a belated warning. Miller stood still for a few seconds, his flashlight beam sweeping over the severe overlapping wounds on the victim's body, both so many that it was hard to distinguish the fatal one from the final ones, and in that moment, a question arose without needing words. How many wounds are enough for this hatred? The forensics team worked quietly. The rubber gloves scraping against skin produced a dry rasping sound, and the preliminary conclusion was recorded in an even voice. Cause of death due to multiple severe wounds. No clear signs of resistance. The incident occurring not long before discovery. Detective Sarah Johnson examined the personal belongings and reported that the victim's wallet and mobile phone were missing. In the notes, a sentence was underlined, "Personal property not found at the scene," a detail sufficient to form an initial hypothesis of a failed robbery. But does a robbery require this level of violence? Commander Miller directed the investigation team to immediately check Mr. Blackwood's recent activities and list of acquaintances, his voice low and concise, betraying no emotion. As if all possibilities were merely empty boxes to be filled, O'Connell leaned closer to the victim, observing the spacing between wounds, the direction of impact, the force applied, and he noted in the report, the excessive number of wounds suggests a crime driven by personal hatred, not a spontaneous act for money, a cold but weighty observation, as it opened a much wider circle of suspicion. No direct witnesses, no recordings, only indirect accounts in the file about the alley that night being unusually quiet, a statement cut off in a nearby resident's report, and that quiet was more chilling than screams. What had Mr. Blackwood done in his final days? Whom did he meet? What did he say? And did he know that dark alley would be the end? The questions hung over every page. Each flip of the file sounded like the rustle of an indistinct whisper. The robbery hypothesis was noted, but no one in that dimly lit meeting room truly believed it held up against the repeated wounds. When the perpetrator seemed to have lingered long enough to vent all their anger, or was it just a shadow moving in the faint light? Commander Miller ordered every clue to be examined from the start, from transactions and social relationships to the smallest potential conflicts, because to him, a case never happens naturally. The file recorded every detail in the dry language of the profession, but between those lines lay gaps where the reader's imagination was dragged into the depths of silence. Someone had taken the wallet and phone, but what could not be taken was the trace of violence etched deep into the victim's body, like a wordless message, and the question was, to whom was that message sent? The night in Maple Street Alley had swallowed all sounds, leaving the scene for those who came later. And as the flashlights dimmed, the chill came not just from the weather, The case was added to Fairview City's list of heavy investigations, and though the initial hypothesis seemed clear, the truth lay somewhere between the wounds and the lingering silence. No one in that dark meeting room said it, but all understood that Mr. Arthur Blackwood's departure was not as simple as what was left in that alley, and perhaps the one who struck was still very close, silent, waiting for the darkness to close over every unanswered question. The doorbell at the Blackwood residence rang once short, dry, then fell silent, as if swallowed by the hushed emptiness behind the thick wooden door. Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell stood motionless for half a second, his ears still catching the faint metallic vibration in the bell. Detective Sarah Johnson glanced around the hallway. The cold white ceiling light cast down on walls so clean they felt indifferent. No smell of food, no perfume, only the heavy air of a home hollowed out by sudden loss. The door opened slowly, and Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood's face appeared in the light, pale, eyes wide but unfocused. No one greeted. Inside the house, the silence was so thick you could hear your own breathing. O'Connell and Johnson were invited into the living room, where everything was excessively neat, as if there were no room for emotions. Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood sat opposite them, hands clasped tightly, fingertips white, and she said she was still in shock, voice low, even unbroken, a calm that sent chills down the spine. In the notes, a sentence was in quotes. "I didn't think it would go this far." And the pause after it lasted longer than any explanation. She mentioned a recent argument between Mr. Arthur Blackwood and an old acquaintance, her voice hesitating at the end, as if the name carried a weight hard to utter. The acquaintance was identified as Mr. Kevin Foster, a former colleague fired years ago, whom she said always harbored resentment, a phrase repeated in the file without further adjectives. Johnson recorded every word. The pen scratching lightly on paper produced a steady rustle, while O'Connell remained silent, eyes fixed on Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood's face. She said Mr. Kevin Foster had recently sent threatening messages to Mr. Arthur Blackwood, and when mentioning this, she paused long, drawing a deep breath, as if the scent of those invisible words still lingered in the room. What the messages said, when sent, in what tone, the file only noted their existence, nothing more, and that absence of detail forced the mind to fill with dark assumptions. Were the threats read in silence, or dismissed as harmless anger? Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood did not cry or scream. She only repeated that she never expected it to end this way, and the room seemed colder each time it was said. O'Connell asked short, clear, emotionless questions about the relationship between the two men, the time since Mr. Kevin Foster's firing, and each answer fell like a small stone into a deep well, no echo. Johnson looked around, noting family photos on the shelf. Her gaze lingered, but no notes, as nothing there could become evidence. When the interview ended, Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood rose slowly, and in that moment, the silence among the three thickened, as if someone had held their breath too long. The investigation team obtained Mr. Kevin Foster's address in Crestwood County, a cold line added to the file, without emotion, just coordinates of a possibility. As soon as this was relayed, Commander David Miller ordered immediate surveillance of Mr. Foster pending a search warrant, his voice in the internal recording brief, decisive, no room for hesitation. The order came like a reflex, but behind it lay questions no one voiced. Where was Mr. Foster when it was signed? Did he know he had entered the investigation sites, or had the resentment simmered long enough to leave no room for fear? In the dark meeting room, as the file was placed on the table, the desk lamp shone on dry lines of text, and all that remained was waiting. No conclusions, no assertions, just a circled name and a house that had closed its door after a chilling interview. The case continued moving in the darkness slowly, heavily, and Fairview City remained silent, as if it had witnessed nothing. The surveillance report noted that in Mr. Kevin Foster's cramped apartment, lights flicked on and off irregularly, and a figure moved constantly behind the curtains. No music, no TV, thus long silences broken by hurried footsteps. That night dragged slowly, as if time itself was watching him. No one knocked, but tension hung in the air, and the name Kevin Foster was bolded once more in the case file. When the search warrant was executed, police entered the apartment in near-out silence, shoes softly touching the floor. The stale closed air mixed with cold metal made throats dry. Mr. Kevin Foster was escorted to Fairview Police Department, Homicide Division, hands in front. No resistance, no reaction. I staring straight ahead as if everything had been rehearsed long ago. He sat in the interrogation room under harsh white light, sharp shadows on his expressionless face, breathing so even it was unsettling. Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell sat opposite, not rushing questions, letting silence do its work, and the record noted briefly, subject maintains unusually calm demeanor. When questions came, Mr. Foster denied any involvement in Mr. Arthur Blackwood's death, voice even, neither high nor low, saying he was home alone all night, met no one, went nowhere, and the statement repeated identically at different times, like a flawless recording. Does an innocent person need to memorize answers so precisely? O'Connell confronted him with the collected threatening messages. Placing the printout on the table, the papers dry thud in the sealed room and read each line, each word, as if from an old file. Mr. Foster glanced over. No bowing head, no change in expression, then said they were baseless threats, words said in anger, nothing more, and the statement recorded verbatim. I never intended to harm him. Clean words, no excess, no lack, but the void behind them chillingly fearful. How long did he sit before answering? Or did he never need to think? While the interrogation proceeded, another team searched Mr. Foster's apartment. Drawers opened slowly, items replaced exactly, and finally, a hunting knife was found, blade clean, no recent use, and forensics conclusion clear. This knife was not the weapon in the case. A possibility closed before opening, leaving heavy disappointment in the report. When this was brought into the interrogation room, no clear reaction from Mr. Foster, just a slow blink and steady breath, as if the result was expected. Detective O'Connell watched him, seeking a small crack in that calm, but the room answered only with thick silence. No concrete evidence, no fingerprints, no direct linking item. The file had to record that Mr. Kevin Foster was released. The interrogation room door opened, hinges creaking lightly, and he walked the whole way with the same gait as entering, neither faster nor slower. But release did not mean end, and the final line in the report underlined, subject remains under surveillance. Did he know? Or did the surveillance exist only on paper? In the dark meeting room, the desk lamp lit the faces of those remaining, and no one voiced the obvious. The case had slipped from their grasp once more. The truth lay somewhere between threatening messages, an unrelated knife, and cold statements, repeated without error. Night continued in Fairview City, and Mr. Kevin Foster left the station as a free man, but his shadow did not. The wounds were no longer isolated. They overlapped on Mrs. Carol Walker's body like a distorted copy of the previous scene. The air at the new crime scene was heavy with metal and cold, a familiar smell that dried the throat from the first breath. Silence clung to every corner, no cries, no calls of names, just white light shining on a body stripped of its final words. The woman was identified as a close friend of Mr. Arthur Blackwood, and in that moment, the old file pages turned to a new one. The investigation team immediately recognized the chilling similarity between the cases: multiple severe wounds, the same unhidden violent method, and Commander David Miller stated bluntly in the meeting room that this was a serial murder chain. Words falling like ice, no rebuttal. As the victims' connection nailed the conclusion, the to-deaths no longer stood alone. They spoke to each other through identical wounds, and the question in everyone's mind: to whom was the killer sending a message? Detective Sarah Johnson was assigned to interview Mr. James Walker, the victim's husband. As she entered the room where he sat, grief was almost tangible, weighing on his shoulders. Bending his back, Mr. Walker spoke, little voice hoarse, broken, each answer needing long silence to regain breath. The file noted his unstable mental state. He provided little useful information, repeating he didn't understand why this happened, that it came too fast, and in the recording, a sentence cut midway. She just wanted, then silence, as if the rest was taken with his wife's life. Johnson did not press, letting silence speak, and in it, a small but sharp detail emerged. Mr. Walker said recently Mrs. Carol Walker was trying to help an old acquaintance rebuild their life, a seemingly harmless, even kind act, but in this context, it became a new, fragile, dangerous link. The name uttered slowly: Ms. Lisa Chen, an old friend fallen into hardship, and as written in the file, it lay there, isolated, not yet connected. The link between Ms. Lisa Chen and Mr. Arthur Blackwood remained unclear, and that vagueness demanded caution. Was the help mere compassion, or the final step into darkness? Commander Miller heard the report, face unchanged, desk lamp on dry text, and reiterated his serial conclusion: not to convince, but to stamp the emerging direction. To victims, one unclear shared connection. Same method, not coincidence. At least not naive enough to believe. In the file, lingering questions appeared between descriptions. Who is next? Or, has the list ended? Did Mrs. Carol Walker know her intervention brought danger? Mr. James Walker's grief spread through the interview room, not loud, not dramatic, just heavy breathing and red eyes staring at the floor, seeking a non-existent explanation. Johnson recorded every detail, including absences, for sometimes nothing speaks loudest. Outside, the new scene was processed routinely, but the feeling differed. This was no longer a single death to decode, but an unfolding chain. Mr. Arthur Blackwood's file reopened beside Mrs. Carol Walker's names parallel. The gap between awaiting truth. Miss Lisa Chen was just a name, but it grew heavier with each minute, and another question arose. No immediate answer. Where does she stand in all this? Commander Miller ended the meeting with a short sentence, recorded verbatim: we are facing someone who won't stop. No reaction, for all heard it from the identical wounds. Night fell again on Fairview City, and under the solitary desk lamp, to deaths lay side by side on paper, cold, silent, awaiting the next name. I was just cleaning. That interrupted sentence recorded in the file in black ink, the lettering stopping abruptly like breath held midway. The desk lamp in the dark meeting room reflected on old pages where the name Lisa Chen lay quietly between two deaths. No clear traces, no mentioned weapon, only silent connections stretched like thin wires. No one spoke loudly, but all eyes stopped at the same point, and the investigation had to turn that way. Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell focused all time on tracing Miss Lisa Chen's connections to both victims. Pages turned slowly, old paper and dust smell mixing into the thick room air. The file showed years ago Ms. Chen worked as a cleaner in Mr. Arthur Blackwood's office and was fired. A brief detail enough to rekindle cooling hypotheses. Firing reason unclear, just date and cold signature at page end. Like a door slammed without explanation. How was she fired? In what circumstances? And had the memory lain dormant or remained sharp? when Miss Chen's current address was located not an apartment or house, but a shelter near Fairview General Hospital, a place evoking transience and fragility, where people live between hope and despair. Detective Sarah Johnson and Detective O'Connell decided to interview Miss Chen at the Corner Bistro, a small cafe with soft yellow light and faint burnt coffee smell, where spoon clinks on cups sounded louder than usual. Ms. Lisa Chen appeared with closed posture, hands close on the table, eyes neither avoiding nor challenging, voice even and low, audible, as if not wanting words to travel farther than needed. She admitted knowing both victims, stating bluntly, "Mr. Arthur Blackwood treated her poorly at work." Recorded verbatim, "He never saw me as a human being," and as said. The air at the table chilled a beat, but her voice slowed, mentioning Mrs. Carol Walker, expressing gratitude for recent help. Quiet and unshowy. Enough for someone at bottom to stand a bit longer. The opposing images coexisted in her statement, and the lingering question, is gratitude enough to erase old resentment? O'Connell observed small movements, how she breathed before answering. Short pauses while Johnson noted steadily, pen rustle blending into cafe background. Miss Chen did not avoid the firing past or justify, just confirmed it as a hardened fact over years. She said she was trying to live day by day, words without drama, just bare truth. Meanwhile, Ms. Lisa Chan's alibi was checked. Parallel shelter staff quickly confirmed her presence in relevant times. Every time stamp matched coldly. No discrepancy. All numbers aligned. Confirmations overlapped, too quick to hope for a gap. When added to the file, another possibility closed gently, but decisively. Ms. Chen removed from suspect list, name crossed with a straight line. No tremble. But exclusion brought no relief. The void behind widened. If not her, who connected the deaths? Miss Chen's link to Mr. Arthur Blackwood stopped at poor treatment and old firing. To Mrs. Carol Walker, recent gratitude to ends pulling opposite, not meeting center. Or was the nong meeting the concern? The interview ended in polite silence. Miss Chen left the Corner Bistro slowly. No looking back, coffee scent lingering on the table, cooling with time. In the meeting room, file placed down, desk lamp on completed lines, and no one voiced the final question. Did we just remove a name? Or miss something? The case drifted in darkness, with severed connections and hypotheses to rewrite from scratch. No climax, no conclusion, just the cold truth that an innocent stepped out of sight, while the one causing to death remained out there, not yet needing to speak. The projector clicked off in the Fairview Police Department meeting room, leaving a silence longer than necessary. Overhead, fluorescent lights cast cold white on the table, highlighting faces accustomed to staring into crime's darkness. No coughs, no chair shifts, breathing even, slow, amplified in the sealed space. Commander David Miller stood at the head, hands steady on the thick file, and the full team briefing began in deliberate silence. He spoke slowly, words falling like metal. That robbery motive was unlikely. Nearly ruled out. No signs of hasty, money-driven act, and the room nodded. No further discussion. The clearer motive, by cold consensus, was personal, from jealousy or intense hatred enough to drive repeated severe wounds, turning anger into ritual. Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell spoke, voice slightly hoarse from sleepless nights, suggesting re-examining all individuals feeling belittled or mistreated by both victims. Recorded verbatim, "We're looking for someone insulted long enough." How many years had that insult been carried? Or did it need only a moment to erupt? The team simultaneously identified a new common factor, not physical evidence, but reputation. Both Mr. Arthur Blackwood and Mrs. Carol Walker, known as successful and sometimes contemptuous toward the less fortunate, emotionless observation, but sharp enough to cut deep into the investigation. In the sealed room, printed paper and old ink smell mix with cold coffee, familiar scent of heavy decisions. Detective Sarah Johnson suggested rechecking Mr. Kevin Foster's background for other links brief, without hope as all new open doors were closing. The check was quick, precise, and confirmed Mr. Kevin Foster had no acquaintance with Mrs. Carol Walker. A dry conclusion on screen, read aloud to ensure no miss. So, if not Foster, who stood between the names? Or did intersection exist only in feeling belittled? The room silent again, not from lack of ideas, but pieces rearranged uncomfortably. The killer, by new logic, a third party sharing jealousy motive called outright in the meeting envy, word standing out among legal terms, but no objection. Jealousy of what? Success, status, or how they walked through others' lives without looking back. Miller listened, no interruptions. Occasional nods, lamp reflection on his glasses making his gaze unreadable. He reiterated, "We seek not a robber, but a wounded ego." Suppressed feeling turned action, and the words needed no emphasis, already hanging from the start. Does contempt, even fleeting, leave a cut? Or is displayed success the spark? Lingering questions appeared in notes no one read aloud, but all saw. Johnson looked at her notepad, cross names piled, remaining space wider. O'Connell leaned back, chair creaked faint, and silently wondered how long the killer stood on the edge before center. The meeting short, not needing length as direction clear, though destination blurred. Miller concluded evenly, identifying the perpetrator now, not tracing specific personal ties, but finding who shared jealousy toward both victims, someone seeing them as mirrors of their own failure. No applause, no relief, just files closed simultaneously, dry thuds. As people rose to leave, light stayed on, shining on empty table where crime's motive was named correctly, but its bearer not. And in that cold light, the remaining truth, a smoldering sense. Jealousy, when deep enough, needs no acquaintance for excessive action. The knot was still there, tightly cinched on a frayed length of rope, as if the hands that tied it had just stepped away in an instant. The forensic light swept over each twist, casting sharp, cold shadows on the concrete floor where the first case had ended. No damp traces on the rope, only the smell of old dust and the dry rasp of hemp fibers against gloves. The silence around that piece of evidence was so heavy that the breathing of those standing nearby could be heard clearly, and every gaze lingered on that knot. The forensics team reported that it was a specialized knot, uncommon, found at the first crime scene, and that information was recorded in the file with a short sentence. No commentary. Detective Sarah Johnson took the photograph, placed it under the desk lamp, studying each cinch, each locking point, the freshing smell mixing with old paper to create the familiar sensation of clues arriving late. She cross-referenced documents, compared, and finally determined that this type of knot was a dedicated one taught only at a local vocational school. Fairview Technical Institute, a name unassuming, but enough to make the meeting room fall silent for a few more beats. Why a knot that required formal instruction? Or was it just someone's habit refusing to let go of what they had learned? When this information was presented, old files were pulled closer together, and another detail emerged in the cold light. Both victims, Mr. Arthur Blackwood and Mrs. Carol Walker, had donated to Fairview Technical Institute's charity fund years earlier. The words "years earlier" lay there, vague and heavy, like a span long enough for gratitude to turn into disappointment. The investigation team reviewed student and staff records from the institute at that time, each list scanned slowly. The steady rustle of pages like a clock's tick in the sealed room. No one spoke. Only eyes moved along the lines of names, columns of dates, and disciplinary notes. Had someone seen those two benefactors walk the institute's halls and remembered their glances? Or was it just a fleeting moment enough to etch deep Among those file pages, they found a former student, Mr. Dennis Hayes' name circled in red ink, no trembling hand. The record showed he fit the resentment profile, a cold phrase used internally, and was expelled right after the benefactor's visit, the details side by side on paper, as if waiting to be read together. Mr. Hayes was known for specializing in that particular not a faded but clear note that made the rope at the scene seem to quiver in memory. How well known, to whom the file didn't say, but the mere connection between his name and the knot was enough to thicken the air. Had he stood there when the decision was made, or only heard about it later and held onto it? Johnson reread the note, lips moving silently, as if reading an invisible statement. In the meeting room, the desk lamp shone on the rope sealed in the evidence bag, hemp fibers visible in every strand, everywhere marked from time, and the lingering question arose. How many years of resentment can a knot carry? O'Connell sat still, eyes fixed on the summary board where Fairview Technical Institute had become the sole intersection between the two victims and a new name. Both had donated, appeared as benefactors, and right after, a student expelled, a coincidence no one named aloud. Or was that the very center of it all? The familiar meeting room smells: cold coffee, paper dust, metal from file clips blended into an air hard to swallow, and the silence stretched long enough to hear a chair creak faintly as someone shifted. Johnson quoted verbatim in the report, not consistent with technique taught at Fairview Technical Institute, dry words, but sharp as a blade. Another question passed through everyone's mind, unasked. Without that rope, would they have looked this way? The investigation team continued, screening, no rush, as clues like this rarely tolerate haste. Mr. Dennis Hayes' name lay there, untouched yet heavy enough to tip the scales. He fit the resentment profile, but what resentment? Toward whom? For how long? Still empty boxes. Had the contempt of successful people fallen precisely on that vocational student? Or was it just how the world works, and someone couldn't accept it? Under the desk lamp, the knotted rope sealed carefully still, unchanging, like a reminder that skill, when twisted by emotion, can become a signature. The meeting ended without final conclusion, unless a new investigative direction placed on the table, cold and clear. And in that dark room, the knot remained silent, waiting for the hands that learned to tie it to appear in the file. He was skilled, but very vulnerable when belittled. That statement lay quietly on the interview transcript page, like a thin scratch under the desk lamp. The smell of old paper mixed with dried ink rose as the file was opened, the faint page turning sound clear enough to hear the reader's breathing. In the dim meeting room, only pale yellow light shone on the line bearing Mr. Dennis Hayes' name. Outside, no sound, just waiting. And it all began with that interview. Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell sat opposite Mr. Hayes' former instructor at Fairview Technical Institute, distance just enough not to bow heads, just enough to catch every swallowed syllable. The instructor spoke slowly, voice weary, as if recalling a time he didn't want to remember, and described Mr. Hayes as talented, dexterous hands, focused mind, but extremely sensitive to being looked down upon, especially by the wealthy. He couldn't stand that look, the instructor said, then paused, eyes staring into space as if seeing the old institute hallway again. The desk lamp lit O'Connell's face, casting a long-nosed shadow on the table. He didn't interrupt, just noted, as words like these often hold more than they say. The instructor recalled a minor, embarrassing encounter with Mr. Arthur Blackwood at a charity event, details told plainly. Just a mismatched moment between two worlds. Nothing major, the instructor said, but he blushed. Then silence, as if that silence was the important part. Blushed from anger, shame, or being seen through like an object. The question wasn't asked, but it hung in the sealed room. O'Connell recorded every word, every pause cold coffee scent drifting lightly from the corner, mixing with metal from file clips. When the interview ended, no conclusion, just a thin thread connecting talent and vulnerability, the institute and a departed benefactor. The file closed, hardcover thudding dryly on the table, and the investigation shifted another step. Mr. Dennis Hayes's current residence traced to an old industrial complex outside Fairview City, the name appearing on the map with cold gray blocks, dead-end roads, abandoned warehouses. Could such a place hold footsteps? Or just old oil smell and wind through iron doors? O'Connell looked at the black and white satellite print, rigid lines crossing, desk lamp reflecting on glossy paper, deepening dark corners. Police sent a preliminary reconnaissance team to the complex decision recorded in a short line. No emotion, like every decision in this file. In the meeting room, silence returned, thick, heavy, broken only by a pen set down. The instructor's words echoed somewhere extremely sensitive, belittled phrases clinging to memory like old smoke on clothes. Had that sensitivity waited for a chance to erupt, or quietly eroded from within? The desk lamp flickered slightly as someone brushed the table edge, surrounding darkness swallowing excess movement. O'Connell flipped back through the transcript, rereading words, each comma like suppressed breath. Charity event, that line close to Mr. Arthur Blackwood's name. The gap between unusually long. How long until an embarrassing moment becomes a scar? And how long until that scar leads someone this far? No one answered, as files don't answer such questions. Outside Fairview City, the old industrial complex stood silent, rusted steel, cracked concrete, a location circled on the map, untouched, but present in every thought. The preliminary team dispatched, and in that moment, everything paused at prediction's edge. The desk lamp turned off, the meeting room plunged into total darkness, only statements lying still in the old file. And somewhere out there, the industrial complex waited, no sound. The dry scrape of metal on metal echoed in the aged concrete space, steady like suppressed breathing. Recon team flashlights swept over grease-stained walls, catching a low-crouched figure inside the industrial complex outside Fairview City. Rust and old chemical smells mingled, heavy, throat-tightening. On the cold cement floor, Mr. Dennis Hayes was assembling a dangerous device, hands moving precisely. No excess, no words spoken, then, just metal sounds and silence awaiting an end. The recon team's report transmitted quickly, short words, no commentary, and Commander Miller ordered immediate arrest, command falling like a cold blade. The arrest clean, Mr. Hayes subdued without major resistance, body going limp as handcuffed, breathing rapid but no protest, as if all strength spent on the unfinished thing before him. Or had he waited long for this moment? In the interrogation room, harsh white light shone straight on the metal table, revealing old scratches, disinfectant and cold sweat smells blending. Mr. Dennis Hayes sat back, slightly hunched, eyes avoiding, initially denying everything, answers fragmented, dry. I'm not involved. I didn't do it. Familiar phrases recorded verbatim. Time drag, clock seconds audible ticking against metal, and silence between questions longer than usual. How long can one hold their denial? As pressure built, gaps no longer hiding places, Mr. Hayes collapsed, shoulders shaking, breathing broken, voice changing, lower, hoarser. In the record, cold line, he confessed to causing the deaths of both Mr. Arthur Blackwood and Mrs. Carol Walker out of pure envy and anger at their arrogance. Confession reread multiple times. No additions or omissions. They looked at me as if I didn't exist, he said, words in quotes. Raw and empty. Had that arrogance built into something uncontrollable. No one in the room answered, just pen scratching and unflinching light. Mr. Hayes continued, words pulled from deepest places, revealing he was planning a third act, targeting Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, Mr. Arthur Blackwood's sister. for mocking his expulsion statement, falling heavy on the table. No loud sound, but enough to freeze the air. Who next if not for this arrest? The file recorded that truth in steady lines, no emotion. Just another fact to slot in. In the dark meeting room as I reread these pages for the next generation old paper, an ink smell lingers. Desk lamp shining on every word. Missing no detail. Pure envy. Anger at arrogance. An unfinished plan all neatly in a thick file, closed with the dry clack of a metal cabinet. When lights off, the room dark again, and those names remain on paper. Cold, motionless.
The microphone feedback hissed lightly in Fairview Technical Institute's auditorium, then died, leaving uncomfortable silence among rows of expensive suits. Stage lights shone straight on the presentation podium where Mr. Dennis Hayes stood, hands gripping his technical project outline, back straight but breathing already heavy. Air carried polished wood smell, fresh printed paper, and the cold scent of money all blending under the high ceiling. In that moment, every gaze fixed on him, not to listen, but to judge. Then Mr. Arthur Blackwood's voice rang clear, public, no lowering. His work was only suited for manual labor, words recorded verbatim in the file, no hint of jest. Laughter erupted from a few sponsor seats, including Mrs. Carol Walker and Mrs. Eleanor Blackwood, faces seen smirking at the incident, eyes gliding over the podium figure as if he were extraneous. How long did he stand there? The flashback segment unfolded slowly, details emerging as if under the desk lamp in the dark meeting room where I sit recounting, no added commentary. Mr. Hayes continued, presenting, voice even but dry, each sentence hitting an invisible wall and falling to the floor, no one noting, no questions, just judgmental silence. Or was it no longer silence, but a pre-written verdict? In the file, descriptions show after the event an unrelated incident occurred and Mr. Hayes unfairly expelled. Decision quick, cold, no explanation chance. He fully blamed wealthy sponsors' influence, the laughter in the hall, the interrupting remark, the contemptuous eyes weighing on him. Cold sweat smell from that disciplinary room seemed to cling to paper. Brief chair scrape on floor, then door closing, leaving lasting emptiness behind. Who remembers public humiliations feel? The flashback needs no stronger details, just those images enough to see something growing in silence. Mr. Hayes left the institute expelled, carrying unfinished project, repeated mocking words in his head, and formless rage. Time passed, sponsor row people continued successful lives, he did not. The disparity recorded dryly, no emotion. Was everything decided the moment laughter rang? In flashback, auditorium lights faded, only Mr. Hayes's retreating back as he stepped down, footsteps heavy, breathing rapid, unheard. Segment ended there, no climax, no apology, just an invisible cut made, deep and enduring. I reread charity event pages, old paper smell with cabinet metal and desk lamp on every letter, period. The perpetrator's excessive rage established from this humiliation moment, file states so, concise, unadorned. Did anyone in that hall hear the tiny inner snap? As flashback closed, no further images, just deathly silence of an unfading memory, placed correctly in the tragic chain. That laughter now lies still on paper, cold as the room I sit in.
The dry rustle of turning pages sounded in the dark meeting room as Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell began cross-referencing every confession detail with scene photos clipped tightly in the file. The angled desk lamp revealed cold letters noting times, locations, unyielding verifications. Old ink mixed with metal clips, smell air thick as if every breath needed permission. No excess words, just silence shredded by paper on paper. This was when truth forced to fit itself every millimeter. And if not, it breaks. O'Connell read slowly, eyes never leaving lines, as one slipped detail could collapse the story. Mr. Dennis Hayes confirmed stalking Mr. Arthur Blackwood for weeks before the first act at Maple Street Alley. Confession recorded clearly, no hesitation in words. How long stalking to turn a person into a target? O'Connell placed statement beside scene diagram, appearance times, movement routes, all fitting silently, decisively. Hayes said stalking not spontaneous but repeated days watching from afar, breath blending into Maple Street's dim night where weak streetlights couldn't dispel shadows. Did anyone ever sense weeks of unseen staring? In the file, verbatim confirmation, dry as technical report, but its weight thickened room air. Shifting to second victim, Hayes confirmed Mrs. Carol Walker chosen as second mocker, affirming sequential revenge motive, twisted but terrifyingly consistent logic. Whose sequence start and where end if unchecked? O'Connell placed second scene photo beside confession desk lamp, reflecting on glossy surface, past staring at present. No contradictions, no extras, just cold repetition of pre-scheduled decision. Detective Sarah Johnson confirmed recovery of Mr. Blackwood's missing wallet and phone, small items enough to misdirect what Mr. Hayes admitted taking, only to mislead police. Only to mislead, he said, and quoted in file, no added commentary. Small calculated move, as if perpetrator playing slow chess with pursuers. Any moment, he believed, undiscovered. O'Connell checked recovery verifications, dates, times, signers, all matching, no doubt allowed. Those items now in evidence bag, silent, inanimate, but once lures diverting the team early hours. When Johnson finished the room silent again, just pen noting on paper. Commander David Miller appeared in file's final cross-reference, praising team for linking specialized not to vocational school, key breakthrough officially noted. Praise brief, unadorned but in context, like a rare breath amid cold facts. That breakthrough closed the circle, pulling Hayes's confession exactly where it belonged, no escape. Who remembers the feel when final pieces fit, not cheers, but heavy silence? O'Connell sat final cross-reference, eyes scanning Maple Street Alley, revenge sequence, vanished wallet and phone, Miller's brief praise, all resting in file. No gaps for speculation, no room for false hope. Truth verified, cold as unchanging desk lamp. And as I close the file, the dark room returns to itself, no sound, no emotion, just lingering echo of a chain proven to the end. The large device lay in the sealed bag, dull gray steel reflecting faint fluorescent light, no use traces but retaining full weight of what happened. Metal lock clacking dry in the old industrial complex as police unit finished search, each footstep echoing off empty walls. No one spoke as everything needed said was on the table. Light insufficient to chase spine chill. Truth this time not hiding. Police unit succeeded recovering evidence from Mr. Hayes's industrial complex and the device centered in the file, no explanation needed. Metal and cleaner smells blended, dry, sharp, shortening breath. Forensics confirmed recovered device matched severe wounds on both Mr. Arthur Blackwood and Mrs. Carol Walker. Verification stamped clearly, no retreat. How matching enough for conclusion and room left for doubt. Pages turned slowly, steady rustle like prolonged heartbeat. Detective O'Connell stood silent, eyes on cross-reference where all arrows pointed one way, no forks. Commander Miller next in file with plan for public statement confirming serial killer arrest, words concise, no emotion, written to read, not interpret. Need more words when evidence speaks. Desk lamp cast revealing old paper creases, traces of sleepless nights. O'Connell final check, habit forbidding oversights though knowing all fit. In his mind only his own slow, even breathing. Then media preparation where Commander Miller would speak, detailing envy, motive and swift Fairview Police Department, Homicide Division work, each word weighed, not exceeding file allowance. Media needs certainty, public reassurance. As Miller reread draft, voice low, dry, no inflection, like end of shift report. NV motive, words there, cold, no justification, no mitigation. How many years accumulated to turn feeling into excess? O'Connell beside, no interruption as this pre-assigned. Cameras roll, questions rise but answers locked in file. Forensics confirmation line repeating in head like unending knock. In dark meeting room, only desk lamp on old file, I see entire closure without imagining. No celebration, no applause. Just shift from tension to emptiness. When Commander Miller addressed media, he detailed NV motive and unit's swift work, voice even, gaze steady. Threat eliminated, reassurance for Fairview City residents spoken, recorded, no more, no less. Will someone sleep better after? Flashbulbs unchanged, the essence just brighter momentarily. I think of the device now, mere evidence stripped of power beyond confirmation. How long their silent waiting discovery. When statement ended, air settled as if city exhaled together. File closed decisively, sound ringing then fading. Nothing to add, nothing subtract. Truth announced, threat eliminated, Fairview City reassured by dry words. I turn off desk lamp, leaving darkness with what it always holds. Metal chair scraped faintly on floor as Detective Sarah Johnson leaned toward Detective Lieutenant Ryan O'Connell under the sole remaining desk lamp. Neither looked at the other, both at the open old file like a cut. Aged paper and cold coffee smells clung drying throats. Outside hallway dark, only steady air conditioning hum. Discussion began without opening words, as if long ongoing. Johnson spoke of Mr. Dennis Hayes's psychological trauma, depth rooted in social and economic contempt, each sentence weighed, not exceeding file allowance. O'Connell listened, hand on cold table edge, eyes on notes where dry terms tried containing the unmeasurable. How many years belittled enough for a person to shatter that way? Johnson, no pity tone, just rereading, agreed assessment that cracks not overnight, they accumulated, compressed by wealth gap and contemptuous glances. O'Connell nodded faintly as confirming solved equation, though result no completion feel. In that moment silence thickened, not from lack of words, but all words already in file. Then official notification to Mr. James Walker, Mrs. Carol Walker's husband, recorded per procedure. Call made, content noted, reaction summarized briefly, expressed gratitude. How that gratitude sounded over line, trembling or calm, not further described. Who knows what to say receiving such belated confirmation. File only results, no post-statement pause. Hanging up, Johnson set pen down, tip touching paper faintly but enough, breaking long silence. O'Connell glanced wall clock, second hand slow as prolonging moment before end. Commander David Miller, final in file with official closure decision at Fairview Police Department, words framed, no excess. Decision, no relief, just inevitability. Miller emphasized team spirit and meticulous evidence handling role in solving familiar phrases, this time read evenly, no rise fall. What team spirit when each carries home part of darkness? O'Connell heard, noted, placed final verification, ink soaking paper like ending mark. No one recalled long hours as file, no room for reminiscence. In meeting room, desk lamp still on old file, highlighting familiar hand pressure creases. Johnson and O'Connell exchanged few short sentences, still around psychological trauma, depth not justifying, but correctly placing in full picture. Understand to close or remind themselves. Outside footsteps sounded, signaling final scene. Mr. Dennis Hayes escorted to prisoner transport, image noted as closing line, no commentary. Handcuffs clinked lightly, vehicle door opened then closed, empty sound in cold yard. Hayes' head bowed, no looking around, as if gaze is meaningless now. Did he think of lifelong contemptuous looks in that moment? Vehicle rolled slowly, tires grinding, damp road sound lingering then fading. Back in meeting room, Miller closed file neatly, no hesitation. Case closed, proper procedure, evidence, person. I sit alone, desk lamp still on, for no one. And as darkness swallows room, only steady air conditioning as if nothing ever happened. If you found this story meaningful and want to continue hearing cases told with deep analysis, please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Your support is the motivation for me to keep bringing you real stories, life lessons, and journeys in search of justice. Thank you for listening to the end, and I'll see you in the next cases.